They were on time and early. My name is Alyssa Best. I'm a career advisor in the Career Center next to this building in Butler Pavilion, fifth floor. And I work with a range of students and alumni. Some of my kind of primary populations are College of Arts and Science and School of Education. Which is obviously a large swath of the student population. And I also work with alumni across multiple schools as well. And I also about 10 years ago, I worked part-time in the co-ed business school working with undergrad students. So I've had a variety of students I've gotten to work with. I always like to say I've worked with every type of student at AU except for law students. So otherwise, I feel like I have had a chance to interact with a lot of different majors and minors and career paths. So I try to know a little bit about a lot of different things. I love talking about networking. Networking is how I got hired at AU. I can tell you a little bit more about my own origin story. And I think that this is even more of an essential topic in today's job market. I've always been drumming the networking beat, but in this past year, I've definitely seen where having a connection, a referral, a contact um, at companies has made really good difference in terms of people getting hired. It's not always a guarantee that it gets you an interview, but it certainly dramatically increases the chances of success. In addition to that, networking also is a great way to enhance your own self-discovery and career exploration. So we can talk the benefits, but why don't we just go around and do a quick round of introductions, which is also a great way to practice our networking skills. So it'll have a twofold purpose and something you're hoping to get out of our time in the next hour, or a specific question or takeaway or something that would be valuable for you. I want to keep this I have a set of slides as sort of my lesson plan, if you will, but I am always happy to adapt and improv and make sure I'm meeting everyone's needs and questions that you came in with. So kind of start with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adrian. What I hope to get out of this event is kind of like how to network, probably how it started lines, see if there's more like a pattern or a process of how to do this because I've always kind of questioned it. I know they always talk about like the elevator pitch and all that, but I'm curious as to like how you can actually like network and like kind of like create a nice flowing conversation with new contacts and new people.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Before we get started, I forgot to mention that we are recording this through the camera up there, but no one actually um, I mean, everyone's backs are to that camera. So if anyone would prefer not to say your name or anything like that, then that's okay too. I just wanted to be upfront with that. And actually, on that note, I probably should give me one moment. Probably should turn on the accessibility features to get my capture my dictation. So let me do that on the front end. Let's see. Do the transcript feature. Can you see? Try to remember how to. Give me one moment. Let's see. Oops, didn't mean to mute. Not annotating per se. Go here. This is maybe where this is what's being. Okay, show captions. That's what I want to do. Show captions. Okay. Check. Okay, great. Let me hide. You know, I think that the captions are out, like if someone were joining live and probably, so let me turn that off. Probably not for the recording later. So, because that's going to be distracting. And although I should say, would anyone like for me to keep the captions on while we talk? Okay. If anyone would like that, I can keep that on. Otherwise, I'll take that feature off. This is my first time doing something kind of in this fashion, so in this room, so give me one moment. Yeah, I don't remember how I did that. Oh, let's see here. Going back. And I was going to ask you what your area of study is.
So I'm a part of the IC program. I'm actually in my last semester.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, graduating
In May. Excellent. Nice to meet you.
My name is Aiden. I'm an econ and a finance student. I'm also a junior. I guess what I hope to get out of this, I honestly forgot that I registered for this, but then I went into my spam folder and saw that I was.
You guys.
I was like, why not? I guess what I hope to get out of this is to become, I mean, obviously not gonna become anything, but to get some like tips,
Mhm.
become more comfortable
Mm-hmm.
in a more professional setting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a server at a pretty nice restaurant. And obviously that's professional, but again, like there's like that divide between like being like a server and obviously being like a customer or a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I guess that I'd like to kind of learn how to reach into becoming just more comfortable in a professional setting without seeming like I'm too eager or like I want something from this person.
Okay. Yes.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah. Right.
But like I don't want really to be like quid pro quo. I would like it to be, meaningful.
Right.
So yeah.
Good. Well, thank you, Aiden. I'm glad you happened to check your spam filter and saw that and
Me
saw the
too.
reminder. And hopefully the messages from the Career Center or through Handshake, probably came through Handshake, will make their way into your inbox. And
I'll
so
change it.
yeah, that's right. Great, excellent. And we're just doing a quick round of introductions.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lucy. I am in the Washington semester program, so I'm not actually from here. I'm from Oberlin, Ohio. Well, I'm actually from Colorado, but I go to school in Oberlin, Ohio. I am a sophomore. I am a sociology major or history minor, integrated concentration in arts, admin, and leadership. So hoping to go into the museum field, and I hate networking. I find it disingenuous. I find it inauthentic. I have no desire to build, meet, or entertain these people. And unfortunately, the way that 80% of jobs are searched, found, and delivered is through networking.
Right.
And the museum field here is quite prestigious and extremely competitive. And I have an internship and I have my foot in the door, and it would be ludicrous not to utilize that. So I'm here.
Well, thank you, Lucy, and I'm glad you're. I want to check in. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm going to check back in with you and anyone else who may have a similar sentiment at the end, and see at the end of our time, and see if we've like moved the dial a little bit on those feelings, right? It's maybe getting to a place of thinking of this as fun, maybe too much to aim for at the moment, but maybe even just to see if we can like move you towards like the neutral, mode. Yeah. And I have to say, one of my dear colleagues who retired this past summer, he's an Oberlin alum and proud Oberlin alum. So I'll be sure to tell him that you're here. And I think he serves on the board of the Alumni Association, and he's very involved. So yeah, very cool. Excellent.
Hi, I'm Art. I'm in SIS. I'm a junior, and the reason I'm here is that I've been trying to get a job for like an internship for the past several months, and then nothing's been working. Then I just like talking to people from the career center, and I found that one way I could improve is through maybe networking better. So that's why I'm here. Maybe there's something to help me stand that, something to help me stand out or just never better.
Mm-hmm. So it's and I've seen you come in for appointments, so we appreciate your coming here and you're hearing, our staff go on about networking and wanting to go deeper into that. So thank you for being here. I'll say you're a familiar face. Welcome.
Hi, I'm also I'm minoring in majoring in computer science with a minor in data science. And I also kind of dislike networking. Like I tried to I guess like not use networking, but like unfortunately I guess it's important. So that's why I think feel also like to just like get help on how to network and build with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's good to see you. Oh.
Hi guys, I'm Bozar. I am a master's student studying international training education. This is my last semester. I'm here because I would like to learn how to build long-lasting relationships. I think I've met people throughout the course of my time here who I wanted to make a relationship with, and I just definitely slip out of my hands. Maybe getting some more tips on that would be nice.
Mm-hmm. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Danny. Like Gulzar, also ITEP grad. I am here, well, number one, because we're here for classes.
Yeah.
And I currently work at the World Bank, and I have found that like honestly networking has gotten me all the jobs or like the opportunities that I have within the organization, and just getting your foot in the door is so invaluable. And I used to work at the Career Center when I was in undergrad, not here at UVA.
Okay, I was about to be like, oh my gosh, yeah.
No,
okay,
but
yeah,
I
sure.
have a love for the Career Center. The Career Center is awesome.
Oh, good. Well, that's great. Glad to, yeah, and say thank you for singing our praises and that you came predisposed, right, from having been a former Career Center employee. So great. We'll continue with the ITEP cohort. Yeah. Another someone I know well.
Yeah, and I'm also grad student, and then I'm here today because I want to learn more about how networking works
Mm-hmm.
job employment, and also I'm seeking for work post graduation. And I think that Curtis that's amazing. Yeah, so yeah, and that's what we're here for our class.
Yeah.
I think we're
And you are a former employee of our career center as well. Yes, having worked with. Do you want to share the division that you worked with?
So I worked in the Office of Merit Awards as Merit Awards project assistant during summers, and it was great. And I've also participated in a lot of career center activities and events like Eagle Next and Eagle Experience. So I guess that all these kind of activities involved me have also helped me grow inside AU and the work around here. I'm currently working as International Student Advisor at International Student College Services Office, and also I work at front desk School of Education. So building network within the American universities provides hands-on something.
That's great. Thank you.
I'm excited. Jason, John, my faculty who brought a
Thank
group
you.
of
Yes.
our graduating students in the ITAC program at School of Education. So yeah, one of outcomes for us to we continue in this course, we have continued to partner with Career Center on some of those job seeking skills as we are trying to also find out right. Glad to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I love that you integrated this into your class. So that's great. Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Bill. I'm a recent Master of Public Policy graduate. And so I decided to go here because I'm currently in jobs, and I've started to network, but like specifically I've contacted people that I've worked with in the past, former professors, but I guess one thing I'm looking to get out of this would be just maybe learning about like more questions to ask people about their career path and how they've sort of pivoted a bit from here and maybe, you know, how to like navigate development is.
Excellent. For folks who join, we were just doing a informal round of introductions, something that brought you here, something you're hoping to get out of the conversation. I feel like we've talked about this topic before, maybe in our one-on-one, but yeah.
Julia, aside as some reason. I guess. Oh, I came because I was started networking with my professors and then and speaking to leaders from the school or the events.
Mhm.
But I was still doing everything, so.
Oh,
Right, normal. I wanted to just like go on making the achieving people and having like, you know, there's three things that kind of like massive development. Just for me, like, understand.
great. And can I ask our two wonderful career center employees, some of the student employees too, would you like just to do a very short introduction? I want you to feel included.
We're senior ambassadors, so every student on campus is more active. Understanding. I'm Bridget, I'm a freshman, I'm studying policy as well. Yeah, I just got my job here in October of this year. So we can kind of do a lot of students, we're always in the office working on new stuff here, so.
Good. Do you either of you have, or do you each have a favorite topic that you're discovering that you, I know Bridget, you're new to the office, but oh wait, you know, and to AU as well. But I would say, do either of you discovering there's a particular career development topic that's sparking your interest?
For me, it's like the resources that are available, especially like my favorite one is Interest Drive, which is like helpful for people who are like thinking about studying abroad or like moving and finding jobs abroad. So there's just like a bunch of resources that the center offers that you might not know that you guys pay for. So just look on the website, look on social media. There's a bunch of resources available.
Right.
For me, I would say one thing that I focus in my work is on classroom presentations. So you do a lot of like, going to people's classroom and asking me like professors if they would ever want to use us and just like be able to share some more resources. So I've been doing a lot of the work that you won yesterday. I think people learn a lot that they've obviously didn't know before and again, like you said, like, you know, pay for all these resources, so I use that.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you for sharing. And then especially as I put you both on the spot, in addition to our career ambassadors showcasing those resources, the career advisors can help with that as well. So, well, good. Well, so you all got a chance to get a little kind of mini networking activity there just now, which is also a great way for us to get to know each other. That's also helpful for me to hear what's sort of bringing people in as well. And we'll have plenty. Oops, let's wait a second here. Okay. We'll also have plenty of time for questions but feel free to, I've of course dedicated time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, but we're intimate enough of a group. Feel free just to flag me when a question or just ask away as questions arise. So in terms of just breaking down what networking is, because I think it's like it can be a loaded term, it can be laden with a lot of emotion, as we, strong feelings, often aversion, negative feelings. So to break it down, kind of how we define it, the purpose of networking is to build meaningful relationships with people in careers, fields, and organizations that interest you. It involves making connections and maintaining relationships with people who support you throughout each phase of your career development. And your network of contacts may help you choose the right career, find rewarding opportunities, develop your skills, and achieve your goals. So one thing I want to emphasize with this first definition or this first component, I know that networking often is seen as, I think, is viewed as something transactional, like, and that's where a lot of the discomfort that people express comes from of, it's this sort of feeling of like, I'm asking someone to help me and I'm not offering something in exchange, or I'm asking someone to do me a favor, or why would they do something for me, or, that kind of thing. So I think I try to take the transactional component out of the equation and think about it more like building professional friends. It's building colleagues, building, connections with people who have like-minded professional interests, just as you may join a student club because, like there's a cheese club on campus, for example. So clearly those are folks who, or beekeeping, and that brings students together who have a shared interest in, a special interest or hobby or extracurricular, or want to try something out. The professional networks are, like I have a number of, I'm kind of officially involved and unofficially connected with a lot of folks in the career development world, especially in the DC metro area. And, that's through going to events, going to conferences. We also, AU participates in a DC career consortium of other career centers. We get together once a year as a collective, and you can, I mean, that when we had a gap of time where we weren't meeting for about 5 years due to the pandemic, and then we resumed that get together last year. And at the beginning of the day, when it was folks from our, and then all the DC area institutions, that lobby was buzzing with people talking and hugging, because what ends up happening when you enter an industry or already are in an industry, a lot of people move around within those circles. So, we have people here who have worked at Georgetown, GW, Maryland, University of Maryland. And then we have people who have left our office to then go work at one of these area institutions, George Mason, Johns Hopkins. And so you end up seeing, you're basically feels like your friends, like people that you've built long-term relationships with, who've been your coworkers, your colleagues, maybe your boss. The supervisor I have now, I met him when he worked at GW before he came to AU, and LinkedIn was a helpful resource in indicating when it used to be, LinkedIn doesn't do this anymore, but it used, well, actually maybe it does, and I just have opted out of these notifications, but where it would, like, when someone had a title change or, or got a new job, I used to get those emails. And so I got something that showed me that he had, started a new job at AU. So then I could send him a message being like, oh, congratulations, and that kind of thing. So you're, you never know, like, who's someone you might meet in this room, like maybe a future colleague, coworker, supervisor, or someone, or an employee of yours that you supervise, right? It's just how things kind of flow. So that's something where I try to make it seem more positive, make it seem more natural, more organic, fun, dare I say fun. When you think of it more like a club that you're, I think when networking is done right and you establish a network, it feels like a sense of belonging. It feels like these are my people, these are my professional people. And of course, like I didn't necessarily know this when I was undergraduate student, because I'd only had like part-time jobs, over the summer, or a part-time job over the academic year, that when you work so closely with people, they do become, like they become so familiar and collegial, right? So it can feel, sometimes there's like a closeness and a camaraderie that you have with these people that establishes over time, that can be quite similar to, to your friends and family members as well. So I mean, I'm careful not to say your workplace is a family, right? I'm careful not to create some boundaries there, but it's ultimately, relationships are relationships, whether they're, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a work relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, a platonic relationship, right? It's about finding these common intersections. So when I think about networking too, I think about as you're trying to establish your network, finding another analogy I like to use is thinking of it like you're on a treasure hunt, and each person that you interact with is a guide who may have a set of clues to give you. And then you take that set of clues, and as you're continuing to play the game, right? And eventually find your treasure, you're on the hunt. So I'll try to gamify it in that way. If that's helpful to think about it. I also will use an analogy of thinking of this process, like imagining that you're a career detective and for yourself, right? And so as you talk to each source, you're looking for clue, once again, the clue analogy, and using that as a way to try to, to uncover patterns, unlock clues, unlock themes that unlock the insights about yourself as we're continuing to grow and change, and kind of getting to know yourself. The more that you, I think, build that self-awareness, it helps you, find these people as well. So in terms of getting into some of the specifics, so one, who's heard of the phrase elevator speech or elevator pitch before? So the idea is it's a short, 20 to 30-second blurb about yourself that you could say to someone on an elevator. I actually had this happen once where I did get into an elevator in a work building, and the person was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And as we were going up, so I had to, like quickly. I don't think I had 30 seconds. I think I had maybe 10 to 15 seconds, but because I think we were only going up to the third floor. I have to when we exited the elevator, because we were both getting off the same floor, we ended up continuing to chat, but it was sometimes that it might happen in an elevator. But it's a short introduction. We could try, we may have time to work on this if we want to go that direction, or we may want to do a different type of activity. Of course, with any elevator speech or pitch, your affiliation with AU, kind of a little bit of actually what I had you all do, a little bit of what you're studying, where you are, if you're an alum, for example, what your area of study, your degree, your major, where that is, right? If it's obviously if you come to our Java internship fair here, you don't have to establish yourself as an AU affiliated member because you're here. But if you were to go to a networking event or a job career fair elsewhere, you'll want to mention that, of course. Confidence, acting with confidence, even if you feel shy, intimidated, or maybe I should add some of the other dreaded, or anxious. Like we can add some pepper in some of those other adjectives that people and emotions people may be feeling. Excited but nervous. We'll unpack that a little bit more. Communicate in a warm and sincere way. Try to remember people's names, trying to say their names back to them. I was trying to model some of that earlier. I know that's one of those party tricks where if I try to say the person's name back or even come up with a mnemonic device, I have an uncanny way of remembering people's pets' names. So that's also, sometimes I can remember someone's pet's name before, like if it's an acquaintance, like not someone, obviously not like someone I know or interact with a lot. But for example, I remember my boss's his mom's cat's name, Caesar. It's Caesar. So and it's a rag doll. It's a rag doll. So it's like that. I'm also a cat person, so that's probably why I just remember these little things. But people, when you bring up these things about that you remember, it's very heartwarming to them, and they like that. People like when they're like, "Oh, good memory," it makes them feel special when you remember these details, whether it's their name, whether it's something like where they're from, a pet, a child's name, whatever it may be, right? Any kind of interesting thing that they bring up. Following through, I get that probably should put that at the very end of this list. Following through with referrals. When whether someone kind of gives you their card or connects with, or nowadays I know you can just kind of like scan the QR code and get like the LinkedIn, get connected via LinkedIn. sending a note, thanking them, like if it's a guest speaker in your class, for example. And they share their information at the end of the class and say, I welcome any questions, feel free to follow up with me. Take them at their word and send them a note and say, thank you so much for coming to my class. These are some of the things I found particularly helpful. And if you want to, it could just be like, appreciate your time. That's gonna make them want to come back again to be a guest speaker first and foremost. Also, that could turn into a conversation that could lead to maybe sitting down and having a career chat with them. Maybe being introduced to someone else in their network that could be, that might be someone that you'd like to talk to. Building a reputation. So looking there, networking also is it's a mutually beneficial / two-way street. So if you were to interact with an alum, maybe someone who graduated some years ago, what you can offer is a perspective of what it's like to be a student or you graduated recently, right? Yeah. Or a recent alum. And what, right now, whenever I interact, if I come across, I went to a small liberal arts school in Virginia, and whenever I come across the current student, I'm always like, I get so excited. Tell me what are you involved in? What's oh, is this professor still there? Da, 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 oh, what are you studying? Right. So people get excited to, make a connection with someone, especially in a small institution like this. So that's something that you can offer, is that perspective of your time here, and what you're involved in, your activities or things that you're doing in and around the DC area. And that's a way that you can be a resource. Or maybe they might want to, or also it might be where they're like, oh, you know what, I'd love to come and give a talk. Do you have a professor that would be, do you have anyone in mind where I might, who I might be able to plug into? So that's another, maybe they're looking to be a mentor, be a guest speaker, and you can be a conduit to helping them achieve that goal as well. Creating a system for tracking contact information, Excel or Google Sheets are great. Spreadsheets are great for this. Also LinkedIn. I wish that there was a way that there are people that I have lost touch with from pre-social media days, when I was in college and in the first, in my 20s working, and before LinkedIn existed. And I wish I had, a way to have saved that information. If it's someone I've interacted with since I started my Gmail account, which was now 20 years ago, that I can find, right? Because everything gets saved in your Gmail until I guess you reach haven't reached that threshold yet. But any my pre-Gmail contacts, I've lost. I've pretty much lost, unless I remember their name and I can look them up on LinkedIn or on social media and try to find them that way. Speaking of, always good to Google your name, see what comes up, think about your social media presence. If you have LinkedIn, we have other workshops on LinkedIn, so I won't go into too much depth there, but that of course is a great networking tool. And then kind of going back to, I'm kind of bouncing around with sort of ways that you might be interacting with people, but at an event, especially at like a networking reception, I know sometimes people are like, how do I leave the conversation, right? Like what's a way to kind of do that naturally, which is, don't feel like you have to, especially like at a career fair, so don't feel like you have to like stay on there and keep talking. If you're ready to move on, you can just, when a logical break opens, you can just say, thank you, I'd love to follow up. What's a great way to contact you, and you can move on. Especially this, people get that it's unless you're having a one-on-one like coffee chat or something, people understand that you're in circulating mode at any kind of networking event. Any questions so far? Some of this is, see, these are some of the fundamentals that some or many of you may know already. Okay, so I often get questions around, and I should expand on this slide. This, I would say, networking for introverts. Also, I'd say networking for neurodivergent individuals as well, who may have sensory sensitivities. I think there's some similarities and overlap there around people being nervous to go to some of these events because it's because of the kind of the energy drain that it can have on them. I, on the other hand, am extroverted, so I get like I'll be buzzing from this event for the rest of the night. It'll take me a while to like come down from this when I'm in like talk mode and performance mode. So this is, I don't identify with it, although I do identify with this. I have to do this, which I added that as part of my own thing. So first, recognize that other people may be introverted, going to these events, may feel or may feel reserved, may not be the most outgoing. That goes to, by the way, to the people who interview you. Like, I think assuming that not, that we often assume that the people who interview us, jumping to a different topic, but are equipped and comfortable interviewing, but that's not always the case. They may be just as nervous to do that, and that might be stepping out of their comfort zone. So remember that other people may feel similarly. A great technique, and once again, I kind of think of this is for universal design. I think these are applicable to everybody. Go with a friend. It's much easier to back out of something when you're doing it for when you've only committed yourself to to it. Like I know obviously this is different because you have like a class cohort, but anytime you can get, it's kind of that's the same concept of like if you're trying to work out, having someone to meet up with, to go to the gym or go for a walk. It's fun and it also helps to hold you accountable. So that can be good. That can be a way to also check in. You have that built-in kind of safety net and support network of going with a friend or classmate. When you go, one of the things I like to look out for just sort of naturally when I'm at an event is if I see someone on the fringes, I like to probably like try to pull them in. So, I mean, granted, sometimes people may need to take a beat. So that may be why they're hanging out, having a bite. Like I've gotten to be quite comfortable taking a plate of food and like having a moment to myself, working. So that doesn't mean that I'm feeling like, it doesn't mean that someone is uncomfortable when they're by themselves, but you could, I think it's nice to try to bring people into the conversation, to look for ways that you can be brought into the conversation. Cause I know that's awkward too, when it's like, if you're maybe talking to 2 or 3 people at an event and then someone just sort of like comes up and it's like trying to figure out how to enter the conversation. So it's nice to be looking out for that and welcome people in. For longer events, like for example, our career fairs are 3 hours long. By no means is our expectation that you're going to come for the full 3 hours. You can if you want, but if you do, then you should do this next. Then I would say go to the next strat. See below. But if it's intimidating to think of it like and a lot of our networking receptions are maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours long. And we offer these because, we want people to have students in particular to have chances to come before or after class because we know there isn't a one time frame that everyone has off, right? Like people have other commitments, they have work commitments, they have class commitments. So if it's intimidating or just hard to fit in to your schedule to think about going as a full for the full time, just think, just say, let me try that out for 30 minutes. And then if I'm just having a bad time or it's just too much, I can, right. And then similarly, planning a buffer of downtime before I did that. Like I always have to have, I don't want to have something like right up until I'm going to present. I always give myself a buffer of downtime before an event. You may want to take a break there. In fact, if anyone needs to, I know we have a shorter time tonight, but if anyone would like to needs to step out and take a break, go for it or stand up, move around. Especially for longer events too, and plan, and also a buffer downtime afterwards. So knowing if you get drained or you get really amped up at these events and need to give yourself time to regulate, whatever that regulation looks like, whether it's to bring your energy level back up or bring your energy level back down, but getting the dials right again is good to think about. And then that also gives you time to reflect and think about who do I want to follow up with. And other ways to sort of gamify these events is, and I'll say this too with attending our career fair, I'll often suggest find, especially if someone is new to going to one of those, to one of our fairs, I might suggest, look for 3 people to talk to, walk, like kind of intend to go up to 3 to 5 tables. So coming up with with a specific goal of, I'm going to try to approach one new person or meet one new person and tonight, or I'm going to try to, make a connection with 3 people, and that'll make me feel like that was a success, right? So that can be also a helpful way to go about it. Any questions or comments? Does anyone else have any, by the way, others, this is of course not comprehensive, but does anyone else have other suggestions that help them out? We're going to kind of, do you have gone to networking events or one-on-ones? Yeah.
Take it to make it.
Fake it till you make it. Tell us more about how that's, how you.
I got the job that I got out of college. My interview I took on spring break in the middle of Peru in a hut. Like legitimately just shoot your shot.
Yeah.
You do not know where you're gonna end up. I was in a white t-shirt, I was sunburned, and I was interviewing with the heads of compliance from the World Bank.
Oh my goodness.
So you generally don't know, like, take the confidence, acknowledge what you know and acknowledge what you don't know. Majority of the time, like I had no experience, I was just a kid who also did not study what they were hiring for either. I acknowledged what I knew, what I didn't know, but I was eager to learn, and usually that's what they look for is someone that like generally is saying like, I'm here because I know that I need to build the foundation for my career. I know that it's not going to be exactly what I studied, but job paths are not linear. And in order for me to understand how the job board works, I just need to go for it. And 2 weeks later, I have a job.
That's awesome. And maybe because of the World Bank, the fact that you were in a global location may have also been to your benefit as well, like the fact that they were saying. No, it wasn't to your benefit. Okay, I was like, 'cause I could see if you're like,
What are you doing right now?
Oh, okay.
You're not in the office wearing a suit. They tell me, my
okay.
boss told me later, he goes, yeah, we were hoping you would get it together for the second round. So.
But did they know that were you studying abroad or were you on vacation?
I was on vacation, I was just on spring break.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
did they know that you were on vacation? when
No.
you said- Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, because I think that also shows that how much you wanted it, that you made it work when you're on vacation. Yeah. Yeah. So how did how did the second, and obviously you got it.
Well enough,
Yeah.
I went through second round and then I did a test and then after that it was.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You had your, let's say, Aiden, you wanted to share.
Kind of similar to Fake to Make It. I feel like a big part of getting a job that you want, that you don't necessarily know that you're entirely prepared for, is that I think that you have to avoid imposter syndrome, because a lot of the time you can get bogged down by saying like, I'm not a professional in this environment.
Right.
I don't have the skills or what it takes to be suited in this environment. That's how I got my internship like last year, was even though like I definitely didn't feel like I belonged in the environment. Like it was very different from what my major is now. Like I ended up switching my major, but it was very different from what I was doing initially. But I was like you said, like I was very eager to learn.
Yeah.
And I was really curious about the field, and I felt like I really found what I wanted to do in my calling. And I think that's what not only employers but also just like friends look for, is that they look for someone who's driven, and even though like might not necessarily be on the same playing field as you yet, they look for somebody that like could lift them up in the future as well.
Yeah.
And that they could lift up right now. It's like it's kind of like investing. You want to invest in like a stock that, there's some risk associated with it, but it's promising.
It's promising, and you're hoping it's going up.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's good. Spoken as finance is one of your areas.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So say spoken as a finance domain. What your other major is?
Econ. International economics.
Oh, international. That's right. That's good. I think that's a good way of putting it. What was I going to say about you said something I was going to comment on. That curiosity and willingness to learn. I agree. Those are great traits that employers, gravitate towards and kind of pick up on. Also, the other trait, the other things that you both mentioned, would be considered coachable, like you're coachable with is sort of the kind of a sort of a jargon term in the hiring kind of management landscape is that you're open to learning, you're open to feedback, you're open to to take on more and that's not something you either have that desire or you don't, right? It's not something that is easy to I think that's not necessarily something that you learn. That's something that you embody, right? So that's an attitude versus or an attitude and a skill versus something that you would pick up in the classroom or elsewhere. So it's I was gonna say I know that my previous boss had said in a performance review that my curiosity was one of the strengths that she thinks of with me. So I was like, oh, it's hear that because I did, learning is one of my core values. So it's no surprise I'm here at in an educational environment. Okay, I am realizing, I'm gonna say, timing out the slides is not my strong suit. Like, I'm gonna try to speed up, and I'm also not gonna stress out about trying to get to everything too, because I'd rather us have a more relaxed conversation anyway. All right, so how this set of slides, how this is a dynamic thing where it's gonna have scaffold or kind of, if that's the right term for it. So leveraging existing contacts, building relationships with friends or family members who may have contacts in your field of interest, ask them to introduce you. So often I'll ask them, oh, no, all my friends are in this other field. I don't have friends in this. And I'm like, okay, but those friends may have friends, like those people may have like another degree of connection to someone who, right. So it may be, you've got these sort of different, like, I don't have a whiteboard up here, but like a sort of spheres of influence, right? And you have your inner core, your family and your close friends, and then you branch out, and then it may be like neighbors, friends of your, family friends, siblings of friends, right? And then it starts to professors, faculty members, staff, right? And then it gets into like the third degree strangers kind of connections. Making your passions and goals known to your peers, relatives, and professors. Like when I asked what you're studying, like I was like, oh, I could tie that back to like what you're saying. I was like, oh, that's not spoken like someone who's studying finance and international economics, right? So that's like, I can make that connection. Online resources, I mentioned LinkedIn. We also have a tool called Alumni Fire, which I believe the link will come up in a minute. I think I mentioned right before we started, but let me repeat that all the slides will be sent out to everyone afterwards too. So you'll have maybe even the recording too. I'm not sure what we're doing with that exactly, but it may be going on our channel. The Alumni Fire specifically helps students connect with other AU alumni who are eager to connect and answer questions about their careers, about their organizations. So it's more exclusive than LinkedIn, but it's more of a warm connection versus you could message an alum on LinkedIn and the chances are lower that they're going to respond, but on Alumni Fire, it's a lot higher because they're specifically like going and raising their hand saying like, pick me, I want to be helpful. Joining on campus and professional organizations, often there are, especially in the DC area, there's an association for associations here. For example, like there is in the DC area, there are associations for every niche group that you could think of. So if you have an interest, there's an association related to it. So there are likely many that are connected to your fields or your interest areas. Many have also a student chapter, offer reduced membership fees to students or recent graduates. So those are always good to look into as well. Also to go to conferences, there's often reduced fees to go to those events, as well as, I know I'm kind of maybe jumping to the next piece, but I remember when I first moved to DC and I didn't have the $100 to pay to go to a fancy luncheon gala for a nonprofit whose mission I supported, but I asked if I could volunteer And they said yes. In exchange, I got to still get the fancy lunch. I think I had to eat once everyone else was seated, and you don't, volunteers don't usually get to, you have to eat in shifts and that kind of thing. But that was a great way to volunteer, attend the event for free, get the perks, get to meet people. So that's something to also look into, like volunteering at like if the cost is prohibitive, even as a student or recent grad, the asking about volunteer opportunities is a great way to potentially get your foot in the door for free. We have a bunch of networking opportunities throughout the year, including employer panels, info sessions, receptions. So all the whole list of activities that we are involved in are on Handshake under the events tab. And many of our events we have our alumni come to as well. And as I say, you mentioned this about wanting to maintain relationships. It's never too late, by the way, to reach back out to people. I remember I serve as an adjunct instructor as well, and I'll have students who pop up and the former students I taught, and they'll want to refresh my memory. But I have a very vivid memory of not necessarily all their pets, but of my students. And I always get so excited if it's someone I taught like 10 years ago. Like I'm so excited when they pop up and and update me on what's going on. So it's never too late, even if many years have passed. But also, if you're wanting to be proactive going forward. I typically get together with a former colleague and a former supervisor. We usually get together for around the holidays once a year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but given how fast time flies, it just creates that like periodic opportunity for us to meet. We could, of course, get together more often as well, but it's nice to know, like, okay, we're definitely going to see each other around the holidays. Even just sending periodic updates. If you come across an article, then, and you want to, you could just reach out with that. You don't always have to ask for something. It could just be, I saw this and I thought of you. Or if you notice, like on LinkedIn, the person has a new job or got a promotion, that's a great way to send them a note of congratulations. Okay, here are these. I think this is my kind of my recapping. So things to remember: establishing an effective system for organizing and retrieving your network. I feel like it's, I actually still have a Rolodex. It's not the one that like flips around, but I do have a set of business cards and I go through periodically and I'm like, okay, I know this person's not there anymore. So I go through and cull my collection, but sometimes like I'll go through and be like, oh yeah, let me reach out to this person or let me, see if I can, where they're located or where they're affiliated now. So whether it's a partial online, digital and hard copy or all online, finding a way to keep track of people you're meeting, making requests. Okay, we were talking about demand, like not wanting to be demanding. I think that what's a way to do this is, and I didn't coin this phrase, but ask people for their story, not a job. So to approach someone is, like if you see if you have a guest speaker come to your class and you're really interested in the work that they do, you could say, I really appreciated your coming to class. I learned a lot. I would love to hear more about your career path. Maybe they didn't get into their career path or trajectory. Maybe they were talking about a policy issue or, some area of expertise, but you don't really know too much about their background. Asking to hear their story. First, that's so flattering in terms of what's in it for them. People love to talk about themselves. And that's extremely flattering to them that you are like, you sound cool. What you do is cool. I want to learn more. Like that is like, that's hard for anyone to want to say no to. That's extremely flattering. And people also like to be helpful. And so they want to be in a position to be able to offer advice and wisdom and insights and clues, as I was saying. So now what's they might not be in a position of hiring or a position of authority in terms of hiring. They may not have a job vacancy, right? So that's where, but they have their story, right? So it's asking for their story. And yes, it might lead to them being like, and you discovering, wow, I really would like to work at your organization. I would love to stay in touch about possible opportunities I like to say opportunities to collaborate, kind of keeps it sort of open. And instead of being like, I'd love to know about jobs, right? So, but of course they know that if you seem eager, you seem curious, you're coachable, right? You're eager, you're wanting to learn. Of course they know that you are ultimately looking for a job. It's not like you have to keep that a secret. Yeah, I think that's fairly straightforward. Keeping your messages short, simple, easy to respond to, follow up promptly on leads. So especially like if you're a professor introduces you to someone, make sure that you send a message quickly, And so instead of, I know I've had students who say, yeah, I got like introduced to someone, but like a week has gone by, and I'm like, you could definitely send a note, but it starts to lose, it kind of becomes stale, right, over time. Also, it might not look as well on the person who made that connection, right? Who made that introduction if you let it lapse for a period of time. So following up promptly, whatever promptly is, to you. Being prepared to go outside your comfort zone. Like I said, that could be, we talked about ways to manage that. Making a plan. Be open to opportunities, staying open-minded. Some resources. So we have our website. And once again, you'll get the links to this. Our networking basics, which is, recap some of the things we talked about. LinkedIn Learning, all AU students, and I imagine recent alumni too, because it's through the AU. As long as you still have your single sign-on portal and everything. Did you graduate in December or in May of last year?
It's actually May of 24.
May of 24. Do you still have access to the portal
I
or?
do, but I got emails saying that I need to switch to an alumni account.
Okay, gotcha.
Within my 6
So
I'm gonna be kicked off.
you would be talking. And that's always some question that I often people ask is how long will I have access to my AU email? And I've never gotten to the bottom of that. I don't know if it's a year or
2 years.
2 years, 2 years, I guess, in your case. So thank you.
You can switch to an alumni email. And I don't know what benefits you get from that. Like if it's the same as student email or.
I think the main benefit is you probably could have continued access to your inbox, yeah. So that way you don't have to, it doesn't get closed and then you can't access, speaking of like having contacts and being able to, to go, but obviously you'll have an idea how to reach out to faculty members and professors, but if there are other communications you've had through your AU email that you want to retain, switching it to an alumni account could be very helpful. So with the exception of you, because I'm not sure exactly if you still have access to LinkedIn Learning, but there are, you can go through this for free through the AU portal. A couple of videos that we've linked here, how to network when you don't like networking. That should be maybe retitled when you hate networking. Professional networking for career starters. And of course, there's, a lot of other resources out there, but things that we haven't gotten to. I know unfortunately I've run out of time to do another activity, although I hope that just getting kind of talking at the beginning was a helpful way maybe that was for some people a way to get out of your comfort zone as well. So how are you feeling, Lucy, about let me see where you are on the spectrum. It's okay if the answer is no, but did we move the needle any at all on that?
I think making it more approachable gives me a feeling of agency, which makes me hate it less. So
okay, good.
Your job well done.
Okay, good. Oh, thank you. Oh, so that's good. That's good being recorded. I like what you said about agency. Yeah, that exactly. That you're in control of this process and you would get to influence it. It's, for example, I mentioned like a career chat or an informational interview, and I'll often have folks ask me, what should I ask? And I'll start with, well, what are you curious about? What do you want to learn? Because that's the cool thing about those conversations. It's not a job interview. You get to interview the other person. You get to be the career detective, right? You get to be, you get to investigate something further. So always, that's not to shut down that brainstorming great questions. I love brainstorming great questions for informational interviews. One in particular I like, by the way, is what's something that it's kind of like the good, bad, and the ugly is sort of the theme. And you can ask this in a couple different ways. Like what do you find the most rewarding? And on the flip side, what do you find most challenging? Or what do you like best about, I don't like to say what do you like least, but on the flip side, like what do you like best about your work? And then what do you find? And probably another version of like, what do you find most challenging, or what's something that's less appealing about the work? And that's really interesting. So sometimes get some really good insights from that question as well. But yeah, so it's especially and when you go to different events, once again, lead with your curiosity. And I love that. I love the embracing of your agency. I know you mentioned that networking has been beneficial to your job search process. Other things you want to share about?
Don't be afraid to take a job that's not in your field.
Mm.
Like I studied education and I ended up doing anti-money laundering. I
Oh,
don't know anything about it at all, but I know that I needed to start at the bottom in order to really build a foundation for the rest of your life to spend it in a career.
Yeah.
Might as well just like take whatever you can, build a foundation, know that you're gonna have to start at the bottom anyways. And then while I was in there, I networked my way and now I'm in more of a high tech route. But I mean, it took 3 years and I've been here now for 4. So like, you know, there's so much more and so many different avenues. And your job path is not linear.
Right.
Take different twists and turns.
Absolutely. That's a really good lesson yeah, I would say for most people, it isn't linear. It's circuitous and we have to be adaptable because there are a lot of work disruptors and things that you all have experienced firsthand. The pandemic being one, the advent of AI and technological innovations, the federal workforce reductions, I mean, I've had so many people vocalize, well, I thought the federal government was a sure bet, right? And that being completely upended. So things that, I don't want to end on a negative note, but like the stability and security that works with certain industries and certain fields, that I think perhaps was, that's now we're realizing maybe that was an illusion. Things can change with these other factors. And so, yeah, we're having to stay nimble, having to stay adaptable. I think about that too. Like, what if, like, how can I AI proof my career? How can I stay nimble and adaptable as, someone can go on to Chat GPT. I'm not suggesting you do this, by the way, or AI, other AI tools and say, based on my resume, write me a cover letter. Right. So it's I would not recommend that, by the way, but not for outsourcing it. If it's a more ethical use of AI would be, here's a draft of my cover letter, check it for, like, does it sync up with the job posting? Is it grammatically correct? That kind of thing. That would be a more of the augmentation, not the automation. But that's a different topic that I could go into in a different time. But I want to be mindful of that. Speaking of, I don't want to stand between anyone's dinner. So I'm happy to stick around if anyone has other questions, but does anyone want to end on anything else? Thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward. I see so many familiar faces, and I hope that please feel free to reach out if you don't see me as one of your assigned advisors in Handshake. I'm always happy to meet, set up a manual meeting. So as I said, I'm mostly slotted for College of Arts and Sciences and School of Education. However, we also do drop-in advising, and I'll just end with this. Drop-in advising Monday through Friday in the Career Center, which is in person, Butler Pavilion, 5th floor, from 2 to 4 p.m. And I'm typically the Friday on-duty advisor. So if anyone wants to find me specifically, although I have all these other great colleagues Monday through Thursday, you can find me on Fridays between 2 and 4. And that's open to everyone, not, it's across campus. So. Right. Thank you all. Go forth and network.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.